So from a compliance perspective, there are a couple of building blocks that I'll be talking about in a minute called a text phrase. Those are the hazard paragraphs in an MSDS. The MSDS class is really what I was talking about earlier. Probably have to actually change companies. He might be here. Okay. So an MSDS class ID, some people might call it a formula class or a template, is a way to express the hazard information for a group of items. This will be constant and consistent for every item, every formula in that class. So every formula you put into this class will get this same treatment. So in GHS, we're actually, great, so I'm in Spanish. Even though it says English, that's fun. See what I've got. All right, so the breakout here is I've built some sections, section 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., and so on. So very kind of visual in a hierarchical perspective. So chapters, sections, whatever you want to think of it. And then once I get inside a section, this is just a tree, inside that section I can create any number of pieces of data that I want to put on a report. And it can look any way I want. SDS is a lot more formal on what it needs to look like. MSDS was much more open. All I'm really doing is associating data to this class. So in this case, all of these happen to be attributes. I'll show you what your options are in just a second. So we've got this concept called attributes. Attributes are in effect user-defined fields that you can do anything you want with them. So in this case, I've got attributes, an attribute ID called a category, or category 2, that allows me to put paragraph information or textual information associated with it. In this case, this attribute that we're using, this category 3, identifies the pictogram that we're interested in. So these are all attributes. Let me find a different example of something, and I'll compare and contrast in just a second once I get examples. Here we go. Here's a text phrase. So these are all attributes so far. This is a text phrase. A text phrase is a paragraph. In this case, the paragraph says toxic to aquatic life. The idea is that every formula in this class in section 2 under the aquatic category 2 will get this paragraph associated with it. So in using Vicinity, it's up to you to identify what the hazard paragraphs that are important and that are applicable to this class. We're not understanding the chemistry, or we're not even trying to understand the chemistry. What you'll learn tomorrow as a company, Lisum, and their product is called XS, can do that. So you hand them CAS numbers, you hand them information, they understand the chemistry, and they hand back all these hazard paragraphs. And that's great. There's a cost associated with it. Depends on your perspective. I think it's well worth it, but depends on your perspective. So we've got text phrases, which is paragraphs, and you can set up as many text phrases as you want. They're actually over here, I'm sorry, under MSDS text phrases. So this is a whole list of text phrases that has been set up in my demo database by somebody. So we've got an English version for that text phrase ID, and here's the paragraph. So you can set as many of those as you want. Okay. We do support a concept of multiple languages, so I can have a single text phrase ID and have different language equivalents for it. Again, we're not doing a conversion. We're not converting from English to Spanish. We're just giving you the ability to have a Spanish equivalent to that paragraph so that you can flip back and forth, which again is one of the big issues of an SDS, is all the different languages associated with it. So fundamentally, from a data perspective, I think we can support it. The question is, do you have the resources, and is your product offering stable enough where you could create a class and represent it this way? If so, you set it up one time, all the formulas inherit those same paragraphs, those same settings. So that was a text phrase, and there are a couple more. Actually, I'll probably just create one real quick. It's probably easier. So I can have what's referred to as computed values, text phrases, and reportable components. So a computed value is an attribute. I'll go look at this assignment of an attribute in just a second. A text phrase we talked about, and then reportable components is where I can tell the system that in this section I want to go pick up information about a raw material. We call it a reportable component, but use that term loosely because any item could be marked reportable for any reason you want to set up. The traditional reasons are to mark a raw material as a carcinogenic or a Sera 312 or something like that, but it could also be a peanut allergen, or it could also be it's got diacetyl, or it's whatever. So you can create any number of hazard types or hazards that you want to assign, and MSDS can be looking for those, and as it runs, it can go pick up data associated with that. Okay. So when we use the term MSDS generation or MSDS class and all that, it really needs to be rebranded because it's not that. It's more of compliance. Okay. So in staying with this reportable component area, what we're saying is as the report runs and it gets into this section, I'm first interested in qualifying an ingredient for any of these hazard types that I've set up. These are user definable. You can set up as many of those as you want. Typically, you see the traditional carcinogens and Seras and those kind of things. But as we move down, we might see some other items. When I bring data, so once a raw material in the formula meets one of these criteria, I can now bring data back into the report. So MSDS is run, it's come through the formula, it's marked an item, it says, oh, that's reportable because one of these hazard types that I've got. Now, what data do you want included in the report, coming back to the report writer to be able to handle? Some of them are exposure limits. When you set up an ingredient, you've got the exposure limit section where you can set up any exposure limits you want. They don't have to be exposure limits, by the way. They can be any other data you want to track. So this is data that can come back to the report, and I can go pick up any one of these that I want. Okay, so I can pick up any value from the exposure limit screen, and let me just show you where I'm talking about right now. So it's under compliance. So right here, any value, first off, I can set up any of these values that I'm interested in and then have a number, a numeric value associated with that. That's what I'm talking about. So it's gone down the formula. It's identified this ingredient is in the formula. It is reportable because of this reason, traditionally carcinogen. And now it comes down to this item and says, what's the exposure limit that I've assigned? And bring that data back into the report. And that's what I'm showing here. I can also bring back any attribute data. So we alluded to this a minute ago in attributes. A formula as well as a raw material can have an unlimited number of attributes. So any data you want to track you can create over here as an attribute, and you can bring back data into the report. And I was just going to see, this is curious, I don't have much there, but I can pick up a numeric value, like a single value equals to 5, a range, text, or small text or large text. So the point is, I can set up a user-defined field that didn't exist in the Vicinity database, call it an attribute, and then when it meets all this criteria, it goes and grabs the value from that attribute and brings it back. A company that will be here, I don't think I've seen Keith today, but Keith Rhodes at House of Cheatham uses this. Great guy. If you get a chance to talk with him, he'll be here tomorrow. They use this functionality to calculate shipping weights of their product. Because there are, yes, the weight of the product that goes in the formula, that's easy. That's the weight of the formula. But they've got ancillary things that they're adding. Packaging, of course, has got an individual weight, and it's just set up as an attribute. And so it just rolls all the way down. They've actually got containers within their intermediates. So they'll containerize an intermediate, create a kit as an example, add those together, and then add a shipper around that. So they've got a fairly complex kitting process. And so he uses this to go and grab shipping weight and some costs and something like that. So at the end of the day, he uses this tool to go through and scour the database to bring up all kinds of information into the report and present it to the user. So with that said, know that it's much, much more than just a hazard information report. I can go grab any data that I want to. And so what I'm doing is I'm just going and grabbing any one of these attributes and I can add them. So at this point, I guess we're limited to 10, but if you needed more, you just add another section. So in effect, it's unlimited in nature. You can bring back any data that you want to into the report. Okay. So that's about the raw material associated in the formula. I can have what I was referring to earlier about an attribute associated to the formula. So I was talking about an attribute associated with the raw material. I can also have attributes associated with the formula. Applicable use or substrates that it works on, things like that. Any kind of data that you want to associate with a formula you could do, and this report will go and grab it and bring it in. So we found that in generating MSDS and the functionality needed for MSDS, we were able to satisfy a lot of reports in really unconditional and unconventional ways. We okay so far? Now, typically on a project, what we're doing, especially, well, and MSDS has been pretty straightforward, and GHS has gotten more straightforward for us. Typically what we do is kind of say, what is the report? Can you define it into sections of data? If you can, then we identify those sections and just start dropping data elements in that section. So when we start talking about a product spec sheet as an example, one section of it is going to be, typically, is going to be specification type data that might come from quality, as an example. Not talking about tested results, but just spec results. And so those may be either attributes or quality data that can be associated in a class. So in this section, I want these QC tests or these pieces of data. Another section may be the marketing paragraph associated with that. So here's my 200 character description of the product, as an example. And so you visually think of the report and break it out into the sections, and then what data needs to be associated with each of those. That's how it works. Now, once you have, in my opinion, the hardest part of creating and dealing with the MSDS class is just doing those layouts, which is what I just talked about, and assigning the appropriate data, whether it be an attribute, whether it be a formula attribute, a raw material attribute, or a text phrase. Once you've got that under control, the rest of it gets pretty straightforward. Because all I'm really doing is taking this MSDS class ID and assigning it to something, a formula, a component, etc. So I'm putting it into this class. So let me show you what I mean by that. So I happen to be on a formula right now. I happen to be in beer. I might have to switch over to my chemical company here. Right here is where I assign this formula into a class. So we were just playing with a GHS class, if I remember correctly. That was the class ID we were playing with. And so all I did now is I've now taken that formula and married it or attached it to that formula. Okay. So forever now, I can say, go print a document, and it understands that this is the class that it falls into. That really worked well for many years for us, until people started using MSDS for these unconventional ways. Because when we were just talking about one compliance document, i.e. MSDS, you could have it in one class. The challenge we got into is, depending on what the document was, this formula might fit in one class, or it might fit in another class, or it might fit in another class. So this field that we're looking at was the original design of the MSDS. We brought it into V4 because we have some people that just still use it that way. So I can print an MSDS directly from here. I can just hit the button and it would print. I have no idea what my data will do right now, so I'm not going to do it. But it would bring up an MSDS. Where we went and where we migrated to was this box in the documents area. So in the documents area, I can add as many of them as I want. You're going to see a lot of familiarity from what you just saw. So I can go pick up that class, and I can tell the system that this document is associated with this formula. So I can have as many of those as I want. So for product spec sheet, I use one class. For SDS, I use another class. For a label, I use another class. So that I can actually build classes specific to the document type. So I might have 5 or 6 what we call MSDS classes, formula classes, whatever you want to call it. I can have a number of them for product spec sheets. And I can have another set of them for a GHS label. Or I can have another set of them for something else. So we've actually got a lot more flexibility than just having to pick one class. This also gives me some capability of doing some really light version control. And what I mean by that is we typically find the bigger the companies we get into, the more segregated the duties are. So you've got one person managing the formula and another person managing compliance. So you got one person dealing with the functional ingredients of what we're trying to accomplish, getting that finished, and then throwing it over the wall to compliance to say, make sure that everything looks okay, you know. And so what we added was the ability to have this concept called regenerate document, which means that R&D can come in, make changes to the formula, put the flag here, turn on the flag, and there's another screen that compliance can say, show me all formulas or versions that I need to review, i.e. everything with a regenerate document flag on. So it's just a way, it's a really light workflow capability that allows R&D to talk to compliance, and I changed this, and this is what I did. I substituted this raw material. I did whatever. And it gives us a small kind of hit list to work from. Okay. I'm using the term MSDS, but it could also be a product spec sheet. It could be a label. It could be whatever you want. So there's some limit to the functionality of this. There's no question about it. But in those environments where your reporting requirements fit within those boundaries that we establish. In other words, you can set up classes that we call MSDS classes. You can set up classes of data, and a formula fits within that nicely, and multiple formulas fit within that nicely, then this will work pretty well for you. So that's the assignment, and I can have as many of those as I want. So I can say there's a GHS SDS English, and there's a product spec sheet, and there's technical information sheet, etc. So I can do all that. And so when I do that, when I go to print a document, let's say a master formula as one example, and I say go print, those documents now show up available for me to print. Okay. When I print from here, click the button and hit print, it is generating the document on the fly. So as of right now, what did the formula look like? What was the hazard paragraphs at this moment, etc. So it's not archived per se. It's not reading a static PDF. It's being generated real time. Some people love that. Some people hate that. It just depends on your perspective. Just out of curiosity, where do you fit on that?
Yeah. We love it because we don't have to go back and manually update a lot of stuff or notify, but we have to figure out how to document what was sent at what time.
Yeah, that's fair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's real fair.
Yep, document control.
So that's kind of the mechanics on that. Now, also know there is actually a screen that compliance goes into that I'll show you in just a second, that they can say, show me all formulas that I need to regenerate. And from there, it can generate a static document. It can create a PDF, and it can put it in a particular location. And then you've got some version control, and you've got a bit more. So it depends on your perspective. It depends on your industry. It depends on your compliance officer, kind of on where you fall on that spectrum. But when you put it up here in this section under compliance documents, it's being generated on the fly. It could be generated as an external document to that, and now we're talking about a PDF. Whether that it's static in nature, it's not being regenerated. We support both of those models. So let's talk a little bit about how that is generated. And to the best of my knowledge, that's still in version 2. Let me verify real quick. Yeah. So say we haven't had any conversation about it, so it's got to be still there. All right, so we've got this concept called regenerate compliance documents. And we start from that class is what we're talking about. So the scenario that I've got is I'm the compliance officer, and I'm wanting to go and look at documents that I need to review. And I'm using this concept that when R&D makes a change, they're flipping the flag, or whenever somebody flips the flag and says, hey, this needs to be reviewed. There are some settings here that allows me to pick which documents I need to be looking at. So I could say, let me restrict to the document format. So I only want to look at those that need to be changed, that GHS needs to be done, versus in the GHS class, versus all documents. So I can start restricting, and I can say include formulas from certain ranges, etc., and so on. Let's see what I get here. So I only pick up one in that scenario. So I've got which makes sense in this formula, in this database. So I've got one document that I need to review. It's this formula, and this is why I need to regenerate it. Had I put a note there, I'd be seeing this listed. From here, I can process and I can save it as either a PDF or a Word document. It's kind of interesting. We went round and round about this one, and we decided to give you the flexibility of either way. I'm not sure why somebody would create it in a Word document, because that's an editable document, but we give it to you. I'd probably put it as a PDF, like all my invoices go out as PDFs. They don't go out as Word documents for the same reasons. So here's a PDF. There is a file location that I can put those in. This is a place in which we are writing to a file location on a server. What you will experience from us normally is we're writing documents into the database. In this case, we think it's the right thing to do to get it outside of our environment, because you may be using it on a website, you may want to put it to SharePoint, you might want to be doing other things with it. Of which, right now, we're just putting it into this location, and then you can do whatever you want with it from there. We certainly, when we bring it to 4, will probably open up dialogue, and feel free to shoot the dialogue already on what you would want to do with it. Right now, it's creating a PDF in a specific location with some file naming convention to it, having to do, and that's configurable actually, kind of what the file name looks like. So it starts making a little bit of logical sense when you look at the file name. So that's all that's really happening, is it generates the PDF. You can look at it. If you like it, great. Keep it. If you don't, dump it and go do it again and kind of tweak it as you need to. Okay. What I really haven't talked much about yet, and know that it's there, is when you set up the MSDS, the devil is in the details. With the GHS, the devil's in the details. Like, most formulas might fit into a certain category, but then you get into weird exceptions. You get into overrides, you get into those kind of scenarios. Know that at a hazard paragraph level, we support that. In other words, you can have conflicting paragraphs, which one wins, the type of scenario. Or if a raw material is in a formula, it has to have this hazard paragraph go with it. We support that as well. And that's all based on the setup of the component. And it's all been there. You just probably haven't looked at it or known where it was. So when we start talking about that type of paragraph information, let me go to, sometimes I have to remember where it is too. Here it is. It's under text phrases. Imagine that. So for a single raw material, I can add whatever text phrases that I need to. So if this raw material is in a formula above a certain threshold for the total formula, so whatever, 10% or 0.1%. What it will do if it's over that threshold, then this hazard paragraph will be presented to the MSDS, and it will be dealt with in kind of overrides of text phrases. So it's being presented. So we see this a lot on the MSDS world. We're seeing that where a certain raw material has got to be disclosed no matter if it exists. This paragraph has to be in this particular location. Formaldehyde is an example. You have other state requirements. California is great about it, where various raw materials need to be disclosed. So that's how you handle that concept. So at the raw material level, we can push text phrases to a report. Okay. So we were just talking a bit about generation of compliance documents. I was using the example as a formula. I can also do the same thing from a finished good, which is just one level above the formula. So I can, if you're more comfortable thinking in terms of formulas, you would use this grid. Otherwise, you would use the components grid, and you're talking now about a finished good or finished goods. All right. Oh, there's the file name, by the way. So it automatically calculates it. All right. My sense, so what you're going to learn tomorrow is that we've written an integration to a product called XS. A company called Leasum has generated a product called XS, and it's a service bureau that does SDSs and labels. They'll be here starting tonight, and they'll be here all day tomorrow, and I think they leave on Friday. So they'll be around if you're interested in talking with them. Great folks. What I'm hearing from folks is that they are, relative to others, a moderately priced or reasonably priced, kind of low side of average. And I can attest to they're easy to work with. So what we'll be talking about tomorrow is what we've done with them at a high level as a preview for you. What we've done is we've taken the raw material data and pushed it to their system. Basically, here's the item, the CAS number, some other data like that, and send it over to them. You might have VOC data and flashpoints and things like that you choose to enter into Vicinity. It can be sent over to them. Along with that, if it's a compound, if it's got a formula associated with it, it's a manufactured item, we'll send the formula as well over to them. And so now they've got everything that they need to do in SDS, and it does multiple levels. So we're just talking, all we have to worry about is one level at a time, because as soon as you've added them all over, you've now got the chaining together, so they can put all that together. And so they'll create the first iteration of this, which we now have running at a few clients, is an SDS. So we're able to generate multi-language SDSs now. And all Vicinity had to do is start sending items over and sending formulas, or what they call compounds, over. This concept is going to go, of course, first it starts with XS. We'll also, 3E is another kind of leader out in the market out there that we'll be doing an integration with. We've got a few other existing Vicinity clients that are using 3E for the exact same purpose, and so we'll be doing an integration with them as well. Lisa was the first one through the door and have been really great to work with. So that's kind of what we're doing on the GHS side, which maybe explains a little bit why we haven't brought it over to 4 yet, is we're trying to make sure we understand what changes we need to make, if any. I think if we've got 100 clients in a pool that potentially do MSDS, probably 75 to 80% of them used our MSDS, and then 25% or so used an outside service bureau. As they go to GHS, I think that number gets smaller. I mean, I think it might go down as low as 50%. So I think it might become, especially with the language requirement, where you're going to be responsible for coming up with the languages, and potentially you could have 20 languages. I think that becomes a challenge. I mean, we're not really changing anything on our side, but that's, I think, where the issue is going to end up being. So I think the number of folks using our MSDS is going to drop a little bit, and what we got to do is, once we see some dust settling on that, then we'll bring over into version 4. So hope that helps with that side of things. Questions on kind of an MSDS type or GHS type calculation? Kind of what we're doing there. Okay. That can be used to generate a product spec sheet. And when you would want to use the MSDS engine, and by the way, the cost roll-up functions the same way, in that it goes down the rabbit hole. Both of them function very similarly to each other. So you could use either one of those engines to get a top to bottom type of view of things. You're going to see, if you have that requirement, you want to look toward cost roll-up or toward the MSDS for the report. If you don't have that concept, in other words, the document is fairly one level, then you could generate it directly from a standard formula report or component report using attributes which you've already seen and lab calculations which you haven't. Okay, and I want to talk for a moment about lab calculations.